Welcome to Why the Long Face? Two old friends lifting the lid on mental health over a beer with author and psychiatrist Paul Keedwell and business consultant and so-called comedian Ollie Turnbull.
Well, hello, and welcome to episode 9 of our second season of Why the Long Face.
Yes, welcome.
Hello, Dr. Paul Keedwell.
Hello, Oliver Turnbull, IT consultant and stand-up comedian.
God, those are the
You
hard
thought about
years.
going back and doing it again?
No,
Comparing?
I'm still probably about as funny as I was then, so the answer it's got to be a no, isn't it?
Okay, well, never mind. How's the unfiltered lager? With the unbranded unfiltered lager?
Yeah, I'm going to post a picture of this somewhere, maybe on Insta, I don't know.
It's a stocking filler of mine.
Yeah, it's nice. Your lady has been very kind to you. It's just a can which is very plain with unfiltered lager on it. And there is an aftertaste, and I guess that's very much down to the unfiltered nature of the lager. But I'm getting used to it. It's really nice. I'm going to have a little taster.
Jolly good.
Wetting my whistle now.
I'm having a toast, pale ale, bright, malty, planet saving, apparently.
Ooh,
I'm saving the planet.
Oh, right.
Isn't that awesome?
That is just so South London. That's so you.
It's not. I didn't buy it. It was gifted.
Still you.
My favourite way of saving the planet.
Yeah,
Drinking a nice, crisp, tasty beer with Cascade and Chinook hops.
Congratulations, Greta Thunberg. And that's how are you? By the way, I never ask.
Oh, I'm ticking along okay.
Yeah, he's had a bit of a cough. The doctor,
had a bit of a cough.
Doctor,
yeah,
but he's sounding a lot better and a lot sexier.
Yeah. My annual cough that I get every
it's going on a long
year.
time. It is going on a long time.
Always drags
I'm
on.
pretty sure it's something more sinister.
Yeah, the big C.
I wasn't gonna. You go there? You go there with the big
Well,
C?
you went there.
Oh,
That's what you meant, isn't it?
That's edgy material.
That's where you went.
The
with
big
that.
C. No, I was thinking pneumonia. Wasn't it the big C?
You won't be happy when next year this time there's no podcast because I'm dead.
No, I'll still
'Cause
do
I'm
it.
brown bread.
I'll be like the authors of Asterisk. I'll carry on when one of them dies.
Yes, you'll. Yeah, like the plucky character you are.
Yeah, I will. I'll be like, oh, sorry.
After your 3 days of mourning, if that.
I was going to say
3 minutes.
Jesus Christ. No. I have to say, I want to put it on record actually that when you're dead, I'll be really sad.
Okay, all right. That's nice. I'll take that. I'll take that as not sarcastic.
No. I will be
Because I'll
sad.
choose to take it that way.
Yep. No, I'm not being sarcastic. And not
but
only that,
I do want to have a comedy gravestone though,
they're not allowed.
like Spike Milligan.
They're not allowed.
Well, he got away with it, right?
In a graveyard. Well, I think
did they plan it? Was it a private? I mean,
He might be in Latin, but I'm sure you're referring to. I told you I was ill.
I told you I was ill. Yeah.
Yeah. I think he might have put it in Latin. I don't.
And
I
who
don't
was
know
the
that
one
for
who
sure.
said he was a disappointment?
Karl Marx.
No, that was us, wasn't it? Oliver Turnbull, a disappointment.
Yeah, and it has to be in quotes. Remember.
That's right.
So someone has to have said it.
It has to be, right
Very
under your
nice
name, in parentheses,
A
a disappointment.
And perhaps the person to whom that phrase is attributed. It's a good job you're editing this.
I know.
one place.
I think probably all of this is going to be white.
Oh, I don't know. I think it's quite. I think people will find it quite. Shit. Probably.
Anyway,
But we're avoiding the subject, aren't we? Really.
oh, nice segue.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, into the main topic, which is avoidant attachment style. But we're going to sort of talk about them all, really, all the attachment styles.
Got it.
But I thought it'd be really interesting to. It was when we were doing the ep on narcissism, and I thought, actually, this is sort of one of the really important dimensions of narcissism, but it doesn't define narcissism. In fact, about 30% of us have avoidant or sometimes called dismissive attachment styles in relationships as adults.
All right, let's just wind it back. And go for the definition, yeah?
Right.
So there are 4 attachment styles. Am I right?
There are 4 attachment styles, yeah.
And what does an attachment style really mean?
It refers to your style of relating to your mother when you're an infant or your main caregiver, and then to your intimate other when you're an adult. And one maps onto the other. So the adult attachment style is formed as a child. Harry Potter. I was going to ask you which attachment style the various characters have. Hermione?
So she's the clever girl character.
Yes, you do know her.
Right, so she's going to be... Well, hang on, we haven't even gone through what the 4 different types are.
No, but we will by doing this.
Oh, okay. So that's the idea, is it?
Yeah.
So one of the charms of our podcast is that it's not over rehearsed in any way whatsoever.
So yeah.
All right.
just-
So
I have
I'd
this-
say she's clever, confident, and secure.
secure attachment.
Okay,
Correct.
good.
Correct, absolutely, because she is confident in her own desires and isn't afraid to express them.
No.
And in the end, she's the one who takes control over Ron Weasley, who is a bit anxious and afraid to tell her how he truly feels,
Yeah.
and ends up going out with Lavender. So
Okay.
what attachment style might Ron Weasley
You've helped me out there
have?
because he's probably the anxious type, preoccupied.
Yeah, anxious.
Okay, so we've got secure, Hermione. We've got
anxious
Weasley.
slash ambivalent,
Stroke Ginger.
and
yeah.
then you've got Harry Potter.
So what's he then? Is he disorganised?
No, let's just stick to the three main ones because disorganised was added later.
Oh, so he's the other one. So he's probably avoidant.
He's the avoidant attachment style. I'll tell you what, right? So Hermione grown up in a very secure, loving environment with a lot of parental attention,
Did she?
looking after her needs. Ron Weasley had a bit of a more difficult, challenging upbringing with an inconsistent caregiving style.
Got it.
And Harry Potter, of course, brought up by
Nasty uncle.
the nasty muggles. Yeah.
Oh, was that Richard Griffiths?
Yeah, which didn't allow him to express his emotions, and so he learnt to suppress them.
Is that what made him a wizard?
I think he was already a wizard,
Oh, right. Okay.
and at least gives an illusion of being very self-sufficient,
I think it's
And
just
doesn't-
about, you've just about pulled this back from
and
the brink.
doesn't show any emotions.
Okay, let us summarise. I quite like that. This is the attachment styles, and they are born out of relationships you have as a child with your parent
With
or
your main-
your main
your main caregiver.
often the mother, obviously.
Yeah.
And the four are secure,
Mm.
Hermione,
Yeah.
avoidant, Harry, anxious,
Yeah.
Ron,
Ron.
and disorganised. Added later.
Disorganised is Dumbledore, probably. No, who'd be disorganised? Betty Blue's probably disorganised.
The mad
Oh no,
professor,
she's ambivalent.
the nutty
anxious.
professor,
Uh,
with the ever unfunny Jerry Lewis.
he probably is good disorganised. Disorganised is more of a state of confusion and in the presence of caregivers when you're young and intimate, people who are showing interest in you when you're older. A confusion about how to seek help and seek intimacy.
Right.
So
okay.
in the comedy Seinfeld, Jerry might be the secure one.
The anxious one is obviously Elaine.
No, but the point was that Kramer's probably the disorganised one.
Got it. Right, because he's all over the place.
He's all over the place.
Mm.
Okay, so I'll read out some descriptions, and you've got to tell me which one. Okay.
Got it.
I am nervous when anyone gets too close, and often others want me to be more intimate than I feel comfortable being.
So that's avoidant.
That's avoidant.
Got it. T.
I find it relatively easy to get close to others, and I'm comfortable depending on them and having them depend on me. I don't worry about being abandoned or about someone getting too close to me.
Secure.
Correct. Apparently, I'm 55%.
Yeah, because you did a test, didn't you?
I
That's
did,
good.
yeah.
Good to know.
C, I find that others are reluctant to get as close as I would like. I often worry that my partner doesn't really love me or won't want to stay with me.
Oh,
I want to get very close to my partner, and this sometimes scares people away.
It's anxious.
Anxious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that makes me feel a bit sad, actually.
And then later on, they added the disorganised type, which is the fourth one. And I think it muddies the waters a bit.
It's a sort of additional one,
Yeah.
like the fourth Marx brother. It almost feels like there's secure and insecure, and
Yeah.
the insecure has several sort of flavours to it. It almost feels like that.
And the flavour of insecure that you have is going to be dependent not just on your parenting style, but probably your temperament.
I see.
You determine more in terms of your genetics
Yes.
and anything else going on.
Got it. So take me back to childhood, because this makes me feel very
Mm.
sad when,
Oh,
when I
really?
hear it. It
Yeah.
does. There's something about a child not getting what it needs from its parents. It makes me just unaccountably
Mm.
quite upset. But
Mm.
we have to face this because this is what's happening,
Yeah.
apparently.
It was Bowlby who first came up with attachment theory. So he came up with the concept of insecure attachment, and then the attachment styles were further delineated by Ainsworth, who developed the strange situation, which is essentially just creating a situation where the mother would leave the child alone and then return to the room after a certain period of time.
Right.
And the attachment style was determined by the child's reaction, both to the mum leaving and to the mum returning.
Right.
So the secure attachment would be upset, but would quickly settle down to play on its own, probably secure in the knowledge that the caregiver would return at some point. Anxious attachment style would often be unconsolable and still difficult to console even when the parent returns, and would be quite clingy.
Because of the trauma, the shock, right.
Or would be ambivalent, like vacillate between wanting to be close to the mother and not wanting to be, because they're a little bit angry.
Almost punishing the mother for
Yeah.
leaving them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you'd have the avoidant, the child who has learned to be like a little grown-up and at least give the pretense of being independent and not caring when mum leaves, and also not showing an interest in mum.
So not
when the mother
punishing,
returned.
but actually been taught to not care.
Had learned to be self-sufficient. I mean, it all makes perfect sense, really, doesn't it? That these attachment styles would then continue into adulthood and affect your intimate relationships later.
Well, you've always valued massively experimentation on babies. The electrode experiment that you're very favourable of.
Oh, right.
And the
yes.
hot poker experiment.
Yes, that's right.
And
Yes.
I think invaluable research.
Yeah. Of course, you wouldn't be allowed to do it these days.
Well, the world's gone soft.
Yeah.
So
Snowflake generation.
doesn't allow physical experimentation on babies.
Mm.
So that is really one question that comes straight to my mind is if you have this pattern of behaviour at such a young age, say the avoidant, which is the one that we're concentrating on, and you have learned not to care, so not to be hurt by the fact that your primary caregiver goes away, you've learned not to be hurt and be independent. Is that something that inevitably you'll take through into your adult life?
It's my understanding, and through my work, I've seen it that they're quite ingrained patterns of behaviour, quite difficult to shift.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean to say they can't be shifted.
Right. Okay, that's kind of good. So if you're a child, should we talk about avoidance, because that's the avoidant type. You have learned at a very early age to be independent. I mean, one school of thought would be say, well, that's a good thing. They've learned to look after themselves, but you've done it too early, which is an unnatural thing. And it manifests itself in childhood as someone who doesn't get too upset when mum goes away. And when mum comes back
or doesn't show that they are.
Right.
But apparently they're just as anxious inside, but they're not showing it.
Crucial difference.
Because they've learned not to show it.
Yeah. Oh, dear.
And often, well, I'd say most of the time, someone who's avoidant wants to be close to someone.
Right.
Just finds it very difficult to open up about that.
It's funny, when we started doing these podcasts, I was a bit cynical about look back to childhood. Because I thought that all sounds a bit Freudian, a bit weird. But the more and more I think about it, the more I learn about these phenomenon.
Yeah, well, Bowlby's a little bit more straightforward to understand.
Right.
That's why he's one of the superstars of psychology.
So I can understand in a child these hidden emotions. You've learned to actually, like you said, like you corrected me, you've learned to hide your anxiety and be ambivalent to the return of the parent. How does that manifest itself? And we've touched on it a little bit in adulthood, in your Harry Potter years.
These individuals are often able to shut down emotionally when a potentially hurtful scenario arises, when there's an argument, and rather than directly express their emotional needs, might drop hints or might sulk.
In relationships, it is said that men can go back into their cave, retreat into their cave rather than have conflict. But I think you're saying that that's just a male manifestation of an avoidant behaviour, as it were.
Yeah, I don't think that's necessarily the same thing as a problem with intimacy. But yeah, I suppose men are less willing to talk about emotions, and that's socialised from an early age. But it's different from a fundamental anxiety that someone with avoidant attachment feels when anyone wants to get closer. There is definitely a reluctance in about 30% of the population to commit 100%.
Yeah, I mean,
to an intimate relationship.
It's a sort of sitcom meme, as it were, that the failure to commit on both sides, male and female.
Well, and the secure person is going, "What do you want? Just tell me what you want," and they can't.
Right.
Because they can't really access what they want. They're just feeling anxious, or they're shut down already.
Yeah. Before you even had a chance to stop them. I've got it. It's described as keeping a distance. in one of the papers I read. Is that the kind of thing? So not getting too close, not
correct.
being vulnerable.
And being prizing self-sufficiency.
Right,
you know.
and you're doing it unconsciously because you can't remember the feeling that you had when Mum left and didn't come back or didn't cuddle you or didn't. Whatever.
Right.
Okay.
Right, and that's why it takes a long time for people to address these issues.
Yeah.
And why they tend to persist into adulthood. But that doesn't mean to say you can't address it when you finally wake up to the fact that you've got these issues.
Well, that's it. With a lot of these stuff that we talk about, it's recognizing what's happening in your mind. It's like these cognitive distortions that people suffer from, or anxious thoughts that keep recurring. It's the understanding of that which seems to be the first step in recovery.
So you can see why if an avoidant attachment style gets together with an anxious avoidant, how that's going to make the anxious avoidant worse.
So that might not work.
To begin with, they're worried that their partner doesn't love them as much as they love them. They tend to be overly jealous.
And then the avoidant person is giving them absolutely no sign whatsoever that they appreciate the relationship.
Even if they do. And often they do, but they don't express it.
Yeah, that's going to be a recipe for trouble.
But the anxious attachment style very often drives people away, even if they're securely attached, because in the end they get fed up with the constant challenges.
It's hard work.
Do you love me?
Got it.
Why don't you tell me you love me?
So can I just recap on something?
Yeah.
I completely understand how a very attentive, emotionally present mother will lead to a secure child and therefore a secure adult. Not in 100% of cases, but generally that will be the case.
Yeah.
What I can't quite understand is the difference between a non-attentive primary caregiver and whether someone will grow up avoidant, I'm okay, you can't get through to me, as opposed to anxious. Is that when other factors come in?
Parenting style does come in. So I think the avoidant, it's very much about the parent not having empathy and not expressing and not being attentive to emotions in the child, and in fact showing irritation, perhaps if the baby cries and so on. So the child learns to suppress that and not show emotion.
Got it.
And act as if they're very emotionally controlled and contained, and that becomes a learned behaviour.
Because nothing can hurt me.
Yeah, but also it means that I'm not going to get rejected completely by my parent giver if I don't make any fuss.
Right. And the anxious?
The anxious, it's more to do with, I think, and there is some evidence for this, although it's largely theoretical, is that it's inconsistent care.
It's exactly what I was going to say.
So they'll get nice, nurturing and loving care some of the time, and other times not.
Oh, dear.
So that leads to constant fear of abandonment. Or it might be due to a period of prolonged hospitalisation. And although it never happens now, there was a time when if a child got a severe illness and needed to be hospitalised, the parents weren't allowed to visit.
Oh my God! I remember.
Yeah,
my daughter got very sick when she was 18 months with meningitis, and we were with her 24/7.
You asked me to come and see her,
and you did come and see her. Bless you. And,
remember that?
Why she needed a psychiatrist, I'll never know, but it was very much appreciated. Well,
because at the time you remembered that I'd done a full medical training. These days, it's convenient for you to forget. It's much more amusing to forget.
Yeah, that's true. But I was also going to say I probably needed you more than she did.
Yeah, that's probably true. She seemed pretty good actually.
She recovered.
I think she'd be. She was already much better, wasn't she? By the time
recovered comically quickly. In fact, she was running around the place and still isolated from the rest of the world. But anyway, she's fine now.
Right. So, so there are many ways in which you can check your attachment style online. Now, I did a test on myself. Diane Paul Heller's attachment styles test. Now, this is not, I don't think, a scientific test, but I did it just to make a point that it's nonsense to think that these 4 attachment styles are rigidly demarcated and that there's no way that you can have elements of more than one attachment style.
So, yeah, a little bit like the Myers-Briggs personality test. You have a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit more of that, and you have a slight bias towards one or the other. Right.
So that's what we call a trait test, rather than idiographic, which is when you're one thing or the other. I mean, most psychiatrists would tell you the sort of personality disorder system is a bit nonsensical, and that's why we now often talk about cluster A, cluster B, or cluster C personalities. It's more an association of different personality traits.
I'll buy that.
Anyway, my attachment style was 55% secure, which was some relief.
Mm-hmm.
But I've got a significant avoidant 28%.
Definitely. Cold
which
fish.
I totally recognise in myself. 11% ambivalent anxious and 5% disorganised.
Only 5%. Oh my God.
But I would say that 28% avoidance probably about right. I definitely don't like talking about my emotions.
No.
Unless, of course, it's talking about you. Then I have no problem.
That's right. Words fall from your gobble in a massive torrent.
Yeah.
And you do get pretty cross. That's emotion.
Yeah. Yeah.
All red-faced and...
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I am a little bit avoidant. But I don't have the lack of trust issue. I don't fear abandonment. I don't get massively jealous.
No, you're not jealous.
So I think I am pretty secure. What about you?
Yeah. I don't know.
I know you haven't done the test, but what would you guess?
I used to be...
Your parents were like mine, weren't they? Didn't
talk a little bit Victorian.
Didn't talk about emotions.
No, but they made it very clear we were all wanted, needed.
Oh, same here. That's probably why I'm 55%.
Yeah,
secure, and only 28% avoidant.
Yeah, I think I was a baby who followed a stillbirth. So I think I might have been overprotected by my mother as a result of that, and so
you'd been a special child, yeah.
Yeah, so grew up
the one that survived.
Correct. So grew up feeling a bit anxious and still obviously carry that anxiety into my adult life.
Oh.
But I would never, ever for a second blame my mother for that because she's still traumatized by this.
Well, it could be all sorts of things going on there.
Oh, she's wonderful, nurturing mum. But I wonder if there was something else going on with regard to her sense of loss of my brother, who was only 11 months before I was born.
But I'd say you are pretty secure because you're hardly ever critical about yourself, and I think you should be way more critical of yourself.
It's true. I mean, I am a hell of a guy. I've got so much going on, and I thank my mother for not abandoning me and giving me toys. I also thank my genes and my makeup and just me. I thank me.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Someone's got to thank you.
Oh.
Someone's got to appreciate you.
I see it bouncing off.
But you're so secure in yourself that just bounces off.
About these horrible barbs from a horrible Coventry lad that bounce off my protective shell.
So,
like
do you prefer not
toothpicks off a crocodile?
Do you prefer not to show a partner how you feel deep down?
I don't mind.
Do you feel comfortable sharing your private thoughts and feelings with your partner?
Love it, because it's an excuse to talk about myself. My private thoughts and feelings are fascinating.
This isn't a narcissism scale. I find it difficult to allow myself to depend on romantic partners.
I had a problem with that, and it leads to another question I have.
Interesting.
Right. Although I feel I've grown up secure thanks to my parents and my biological makeup and just my general essence of aceness, I had my heart broken once, and that had a big effect on my ability to trust. So my question really is, can things that happen to you, and the obvious answer is yes, can put you into different type of modes because you've just had that kind of emotional trauma in your life? And the answer must be yes.
I think so, yeah. Because a betrayal is a trauma that can stay with you. And affect your attachment style. I think that's almost certainly true. And
then I've sort of recovered back relatively quickly to a secure style. I'm very secure in my marriage, I feel.
Yeah, and I think that's because it doesn't have such a deep imprint on your functioning as something that happens in childhood.
Nice theory. I'm just thinking about how I feel about my marriage. And it's very, even when I am totally useless at something which my wife values, such as spontaneously going out and gathering wood for the wood burner.
The fuel and wood situation.
The fuel and wood situation.
Yeah.
I think, well, I'm sure I compensate by the fact that we have a really good laugh together.
Yeah, you do. I think humour has been very useful for you too. I mean, she has to have a sense of humour to marry you. Right?
Well, she certainly has to see me naked.
And that too. So, moving on, Oliver, quickly, I think, because at the moment I've just got the image of you naked in my head, and I need that to be
everything wobbling,
removed very, very quickly.
Everything longer than it should have been.
Quickly as you can. Next question, please. Thank you. Please. Oh God, he's deliberately delaying now. He's just staring at me.
Oh no, I thought you were asking me questions.
No, I want. Well, I can ask you a few more.
Well, I don't know. It's a bit dull. We've established that I'm secure with very good reason.
You're pretty secure
with very good reason.
Don't know why, but you are fairly secure.
Well, that's the funny thing. Utter dicks can be secure.
Good. Okay, let's move on then.
Why do you crunch the numbers and tell me what I am? It says you're a twat.
I'm just reading out traits. So it's not a test. This one, not
Okay.
scored. It's not scored.
All right, fine. So I do have more questions. So we've talked about some of the negative effects in adulthood. We've talked about keeping a distance. We've talked about repression and negativity as well.
I don't think that's necessarily true. I think that is something that may go along with critical inner voices.
Right.
But you probably need other things going on there.
Understood.
Yeah, well, I think it's a certain type of emotional neglect
Yeah.
that avoidant people have. Or maybe just a lack of emotional language in the household.
Does it go down through the generations? If you're an avoidant kind
Correct.
of person, oh,
Correct.
man,
Yeah.
It's not at all surprising. Is
No,
it, when you think
absolutely
about
not.
Yeah.
Intergenerational transmission. Yeah, I think that is absolutely what happens.
it.
If someone made you emotionally unavailable,
Mm.
then how are you going to be available to your child?
Or even understand how important it is.
Very difficult,
Almost
unless you
impossible.
address it at some point in your adult life.
Well, that's quite interesting because I think some people might be listening and going, this completely describes my partner. You know, they're
Right.
distant, they find fault with me, they give me mixed signals, they're madly in love with me one day and the next day they're not. They try to sabotage the relationship.
Ooh, good list of traits there.
Yeah.
Finding fault is a common one.
Oh, right.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. So, and it's an unconscious process. Usually, the partner doesn't realise they're doing it. They're notching up faults in their other partners for reasons why they should not be with them. It's an unconscious cognitive mechanism for again pushing someone away.
Yet again, this what happened in childhood is starting to make a hell of a lot more sense. Now you dive into it. So it's quite hurtful. If you're with a partner who is avoidant, they exhibit traits which are actually quite hurtful to you because you love them more than anyone else in the world. I would imagine it's very healthy for you one to recognise that you're with someone who is avoidant attachment.
Yes, and that's why we're doing this, really.
So
Yeah.
makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
There's method.
And for the people out there who recognise this in themselves, there is absolutely a way to improve things. I mean, there are probably 3 different ways that I've read.
Yeah, I read a list. Let's see if you got the same ones.
Okay. Well, the first big one was have a relationship with someone who's securely attached.
But you can't tell who you're going to fall for, eh?
No.
Because people who are avoidant may be incredibly charming or sexy.
Unless you've educated yourself and you know what to look out for.
That's a very good point. Yeah. Okay.
That's one solution. And you do see it all the time that people are kind of saved by going for a different partner type, breaking out of what they normally do.
So sorry,
because avoidance often will choose other avoidance.
That's what I was coming to.
You don't have to commit then, do you?
Right.
You know.
So you're comfortable in your lack of commitment until you fall for them.
Or they'll have a superficial relationship, or they'll just have a sexually promiscuous lifestyle.
I was going to say, it doesn't stop you wanting to have sex.
Yeah, yeah.
If you're avoidant.
So you're getting the closeness that you need, or the sex that you need, but you're not having to get.
So this is the friends with benefits kind of rom-com.
That would be the perfect.
Yeah, but then it isn't because one of them always falls for the other one.
When Harry met Sally, Harry was the avoidant, wasn't he? He was the classic avoidant trope, wasn't he? He didn't like to get close. He didn't like to talk about emotions.
That's
Isn't
right.
that right?
I think that was his thesis.
And
yeah.
she was the anxious type, I think.
Yeah. And then
in the end, he ends up falling for her.
Yeah.
Whereas in reality, they'd probably just split apart. Well, they do split apart and get back together because it's Hollywood.
Yeah, I think we might be conflating that with the Lion King. But anyway,
possibly a very condensed process by which an avoidant suddenly becomes more secure.
One thing I read about if you are with an avoidant person is don't take it personally.
Right. Understand rather than condemn.
Which is very difficult when you're in love with someone and they're sitting on the sofa saying,
True.
I don't want to talk about it.
True.
Must be very, very hard.
True.
But if you start to say, well, and you do sometimes hear this, you say, he had a problematic relationship with his mother, so he's a bit like this. He retreats into his man cave. And that's someone actually recognizing, I guess, without realizing it potentially, an avoidant chap, and actually compensating for it, which is really rather a sign of proper love, I think.
And I think also realizing that actually there's a dimension, a spectrum from anxious, ambivalent on one hand, to avoidant on the other end of the dimension, with secure kind of in the middle. Because if you think about it, they are opposing poles.
Let me think about that for a while. So one is sort of neurotic and worrying, and the other is they don't give a shit. Is that kind of where you're coming from?
Yeah.
And in the middle is the Goldilocks zone.
Yeah, which is they definitely express emotions that might tip into avoidant or anxious at times, but most of the time pretty secure.
The other thing I've heard is be reliable. So obviously they have suffered in the past from someone
Unreliable
being
caregivers.
unreliable.
Yeah.
So you can maybe build up a resistance to avoidance behaviour by being reliable yourself.
Right.
Which is quite a responsibility.
Right.
You might think, is it worth it? But if you really love somebody, it's kind of worth it, eh?
Yeah. So that anything else you read?
Yeah, a few more.
Okay.
Don't push too hard.
Yes,
So
because then they'll push.
When are we going to move in? When are we going to move in?
When are we going to commit? When are you going to commit? Why haven't you told me you love me?
Yeah.
And the problem is that they will probably just freeze and back off and close down.
Give them space.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Space and time.
Good one. Because if you are doing the be reliable thing, there is an implication there that it's going to take time for that pattern of behaviour in them to change.
Correct. And if you really love them, it's worth it.
Yeah.
It's worth sticking with.
Oh, you've got to believe that, man. You've got to believe that.
Yeah.
And then the last one was stand your ground. So this is sort of like it's give them their space, understand them, let them be themselves, be reliable, but actually don't be a pushover.
Yes. Yeah.
Realise what's going on.
And don't stick around forever.
Yeah. There's an example here. If they never want to go out on a date, but that's important to you, let them know and stick to it.
Yeah.
So
that they will...
There's a bit of balance.
So there has to be some balance. But that bit of advice might be for someone who's the anxious avoidant type as well. Yeah?
Maybe.
Stand your ground.
Maybe. I like those bits of advice. I think they sound really...
They make a lot of sense to me too. I thought that was a good article.
Yeah.
And it was written in a very accessible way.
It was. I understood it.
Because a lot of the time... there's a lot of mumbo-jumbo around attachment theory. Well, about psychotherapy in general and psychological development. I think it can get overcomplicated sometimes.
Yeah, that was well written. And we try to do that, don't we?
We do. We try to demystify a bit.
I try to be the man on the Clapham omnibus.
We both try to not use too much technical language.
Yeah, and I certainly ask stupid questions.
Which I love.
Okay, I have a couple of other things I'd like to cover if we have time. Can someone with avoidant attachment style also manifest with other relationships, so relationships with siblings, relationships with friends, work colleagues, or does it predominate in the romantic attachment space, so the romantic partner space?
I think it predominates in that space, but I think you'd also find it difficult to talk about emotions in general with anyone in any relationship.
Right, but you wouldn't necessarily push them away, because in a friendship the stakes aren't as high as in a romantic entanglement. So you can find people who skip from one partner to another but still have a solid group of mates, potentially.
Right.
Which makes sense.
Right.
But then they're the kind of mates that you wouldn't open up to maybe if you were the avoidant type.
Yeah.
I get it. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I had another question as well.
Okay.
In maybe in the more extreme cases, any other manifestations other than problematic relationships that you might encounter? I'm thinking in terms of anxiety, maybe even personality or borderline personality disorder, maybe even depression. Yeah. It seems to me that a not unsubstantial amount of trauma is involved in becoming someone with this trait, and therefore are they maybe vulnerable to...
It's about how much, the degree to which the child was traumatized.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe if there's physical or even sexual abuse in there as well, then I think you're more likely to see this attachment style in the context of a personality disorder,
right?
Usually of the borderline type.
Remind me what borderline means.
It's a psychoanalytical concept which originally referred to the borderline between the neurotic and the psychotic. In that sometimes people with borderline personality disorder can hear voices perhaps of the abuser from childhood. It's what we call a dissociative state.
A memory / awakening dream or something, right? Got it. Right.
And it's also associated with a difficulty regulating your emotions. So you can have very strong swings of emotion. And that's thought to be due to a dysregulation of the stress hormone cortisol, when you're a child. You don't learn to regulate.
Oh my God! So it actually physiologically affects your
Yes.
body and your ability to.
Yeah.
Good
to a
Lord.
degree. Yeah.
Oh my God! This brings me to my last point,
Okay.
which is it's now made me feel anxious as a parent. I'm a parent of 2 children.
Okay.
And I think what we do not want to do with this podcast is make parents paranoid that they're damaging their children.
The father of attachment theory, Jonathan Bowlby, said that you only need to be the good enough mother. But it could be the father, whoever the main carer is. You just need to be good enough.
My experience of fatherhood, and I wasn't the primary caregiver, my wife was, but that actually a lot of this stuff does come naturally.
Yeah. I think you are always very aware of the fact that your parents were old school like mine and didn't tend to talk about emotions very much.
Not at all.
And they wouldn't be the type to tell you that they loved you and they cared for you. And talking and actually saying it is really, really important.
My mum did, my dad didn't. He had to make it clear in other ways. Poor fellow.
Right.
But he did.
Because
God
that's
bless him.
probably how he was brought up.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
Intergenerational thing. So, yeah, telling people you love them, showing you love them, being there for them, but also, I suppose, standing your ground when they're naughty.
Oh, well, of course. I mean, that's part of love, isn't it?
Yeah.
I just feel sorry for maybe the woman suffering from postnatal depression and the additional worry they'll have, which we don't want to put on them, that they're not responding to their baby's needs. What advice would you give to that kind of mother?
The advice there is always get early help. And if you know you've had postnatal depression before, all the services should be alerted at the point where you're planning the pregnancy. One other thing, though, that I would say on that is that Bowlby said children are quite resilient and they can put up with a lot of inconsistent care, from one parent, provided there is a significant other there for them.
Right.
They just need one consistent caregiver.
Right.
One, what you call attachment figure.
Right.
And they can be quite resilient. So I guess the other partner can take over a bit more.
Can the other partner just come in for a brief period to be the primary caregiver and then withdraw and then the other? Oh, right, okay. That's good. Yeah. I just feel this horrible feeling that we make parents feel, particularly new parents or expectant parents, feel paranoid and anxious about being good parents, and they shouldn't be. Like you say,
all parents worry about whether they're being good enough.
Well, that's true.
But actually, you're being good enough if you show your kids love.
Final question. If you have heard this podcast and you think that's me, and you've got a sort of revelation that, hang on a minute. I do push people
What do I
away.
do about it?
And people do find me cold, and I'm not really. And I'm screaming to be intimate, but I just can't do it. What would you do? What would you advise someone who feels that way?
So I would say seek therapy, or if you're in a relationship, speak to your partner openly about it. Often therapy can work very well alongside that. You being in a secure relationship. And perhaps even some couple therapy with the therapist who's very experienced in attachment problems would be a good way to go. But the therapist will generally do the job of the secure partner who sticks around. It's about being reliable, giving unconditional positive regard, for making that person feel secure over time, so they vicariously learn perhaps to be more secure themselves, and be more trusting, and deal with their abandonment issues in that way. What did you read anything more about that?
No. The reason I'm looking through my notes here because
another thing that's supposed to help is writing a biography, so that you can work out and make sense. Writing a narrative, actually literally writing down a story of your life and how you think that your childhood led to how you function now as an adult. And
one point I really want to make, I don't want to get all Philip Larkin about this, because I imagine, and I want to hear it from you rather from a rank amateur like me, that there is very little mileage to be gained from raking up old ground and starting to blame your mum, blame your dad.
You may go through a phase of that. I think it's inevitable that during a course of therapy, you're going to have all sorts of emotions, and it's okay to express anger. In the therapy about your parents, and there'll possibly be a phase of that, and just to be aware of it.
Is it quite important, though, to forgive your parents in a sense, if you can? And I'm not talking about abusive parents. I'm talking about people parents who've made mistakes without knowing it, or because they were going through their own stuff.
Abuse.
I mean, I'd say forgiveness.
Abuse or neglect isn't always conscious. I mean, that's not.
Yeah.
In fact, it often isn't, I suppose, and the parent doesn't know any better. But forgiveness and acceptance and moving on may involve a conversation with your parent.
Yeah,
that is often the most therapeutic thing, but that's not always possible. The parent may have died, or the parent may just not be interested and not want the conversation.
Yeah,
in which case you have to process this in other ways.
Or indeed they might not understand, or you might fear that they'd be hurt if they're very aged, and you bring up a load of stuff. I think if I did this with my father, he'd be very, very hurt. Not that I need to do it with my father, because he was very loving, but he would be very, very hurt to think that he'd made that kind of mistake, I think. So I would definitely avoid it.
Yeah. Well, I think that you can't make a general rule for everybody.
No.
But there are other ways of doing it. Role play, for example, or the empty chair.
What the hell are you talking about?
You can shout.
Monty Python.
You can put your father or your mother in that empty chair in the therapy room and shout at it.
For the record, he's pointing at an invisible chair. It's absolutely insane. No, I jest, obviously. Right, so
I've gone into disorganisation mode. It's that 2%.
So you have the argument
I'm also at the bottom of my can of toast pale ale.
Well, I think that might be a good place to stop.
I think so. Are we going to do... is it time for one of your summings up?
I think it might be what I have learned today. So I have learned a lot today. Do you know what? I'm ending this episode feeling very positive, actually.
Yeah.
Because I think I'm hoping. I mean, this is why we do this podcast, is for people who are listening to go, oh, hang on a minute, that's quite helpful. I just sneezed.
Yeah, because I used to have a relationship with an avoidant person, and I blame myself for it, or I am that person, and I have to realise that actually I'm denying myself what I really need, which is intimacy.
Yeah.
And I need to do something about it. That'd be fantastic.
Imagine if we reached out to somebody.
That'd be fantastic.
We've had a couple of letters, actually, about letters. What's the matter with me? A couple of electronic communications about episodes we've done that have helped people.
All right, Grandad. Yeah.
We've had Telegram. Telegram, why the long face? I like your podcast. Stop. Please stop. Stop.
Hold on. There's a carrier pigeon just arrived. The latest message.
We could go on. There's a man he's ran all the way from Marathon to tell us of a great victory.
Yeah, indeed.
Your go. So I have learnt today that there are several attachment styles, almost exclusively which are determined by the kind of parenting you have.
Mm-hmm.
We have talked about the secure. Yeah. We have talked about the avoidant. And we have talked about the anxious, and there is a fourth category, disorganised, which we've talked about less. But the top three we've certainly talked about.
And the disorganised is only about 3% of the population.
Right. Yeah. And we have also said that it's not an exact science, and you're not 100% secure or 100% avoidant or 100%
Definitely
anxious.
Not.
You are a mixture.
Yeah.
We've analysed you, and we found you to be an imbecile, but also a secure imbecile, which is quite nice. Often, if not always, these attachment styles do manifest themselves in adulthood, particularly when it comes to forming intimate relationships.
Correct.
Normally romantic relationships. And we talked about through all the characteristics of someone who is avoidant, which is the style that we have majored on.
Yeah.
And they are things like sometimes being overcritical, failing to be able to show their emotions, and failing to be able to commit fully to a romantic relationship.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We have also found that there are ways to correct that. The first being to recognise that personality
that you have
type
that pattern
within you or within your partner. And there's very optimistic passage that we went through, which says some of the things that you can do to help.
Yeah.
There are potentially other negative, potentially mental illnesses that can be associated with someone who suffers from an extreme form of avoidant attachment style, such as anxiety, possibly depression, and maybe even borderline personality disorders. But that's extreme and uncommon.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I suppose anxiety and depression resulting from failed relationships is going to be the most common association. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not impossible for you to have a trauma in adulthood in terms of some
True,
kind of
which
heartbreak.
could bring on, at least temporarily, this
Yes.
type of attachment style. Yeah.
And you're saying that's probably easier fixed, although the one born out
yeah.
of childhood is not impossible to fix. The first stage of it being
But it's more
recognition.
ingrained. Yeah.
Look, of course,
Yeah.
it's more ingrained. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Decent summary.
Yes, I think so. In fact, one of your best.
Oh, a doctor.
You get a gold star.
I really enjoyed that. And I thought, when I first thought that, this is going to be as dry as a horse's scrotum.
And it wasn't.
No,
It was all right. But I will let you be the judge of it, though, ultimately. And this is where our call to action comes.
Call to action.
We want you to get in touch with us and tell us if you have an avoidant attachment style, or if you know someone with an avoidant attachment style.
Pull yourself
Maybe
together.
you find it... Oliver.
Sorry.
Joking, of course. But if you find that there's a pattern of relationships that seem to recur, and you've not really thought about it in terms of attachment before, and you think, actually, this could be a way through, could be a breakthrough. This doesn't sound like Freudian mumbo jumbo. I can get my head around this.
That would be great.
Yeah, and tell us your stories, and also tell us what we missed out. Maybe we can mention it in future podcasts.
Yeah, because we have had feedback on people suffering from anxiety, people who use creativity to help with their depression and mental illness, and indeed someone today got in contact with us with their story about their child who'd been recently diagnosed autistic, who is, by the way, doing very well now.
Oh, good, good. Well, we're gonna start doing some mailbags, I think.
We've got to do that, man.
Yeah.
We've got to do that, man. The love's coming our way.
But we can't just ramble on forever. So
No.
we'll see you next time.
Yeah, what about the call to action?
Just done it.
Oh, yeah, but how?
Oh, well, you can go and find us on Facebook. We're
That's a good
Why the
idea.
Long Face. We have a website, ytlf.com, which is whytlf.com.
Very good.
We're on Twitter with
Yeah.
the same handle. We're also
Instagram.
on Instagram.
Can't bear Instagram.
And please rate us on any way, wherever you get your podcasts, wherever you're listening to this.
iTunes,
if you feel like it.
Spotify, SoundCloud.
Yeah.
Lovely to hear from you. Thank you so much for staying with us.
Okay. Bye for now.